And there you have it. Next step, we're going to go switch over to the Amiga side. So, in this next bit, we're going to move over to the actual hardware. So as you can see, we got our machine running right here. Got it hooked up through its HDMI output to the Elgato, which is feeding things over onto my OBS screen. I've also got Pro FTPD running on the Linux machine, or any other FTPD would work fine. Just bypasses a few headaches with SSL versions and all that. Then over here we're using Pete's FTP to actually pull files and put files back and forth to the other environment. In this case, we're going to go over one of, I believe it's the Warp demos. But basically it's a program that will load a JPEG. And so this next part, the Warp 3D Nova, indirectly through native rendering or VA APIs. This will be an Amiga native using OS4 and kind of shows how the code flow happens in there. It's going to show us kind of how CodeBench coordinates things. Now, what the project origin license, based on Tiny JPEG, minimalist JPEG encoder, written in 2006, apparently maintained by Intel. So this one's got some tricky roots, right? We got to think about that licensing. It basically is going to take a command line argument, and then it's going to use that command line argument to load a viewer of whatever the JPEG file is. Now in this case, we're just pulling this from one of the SDKs. When we did the installations of the enhancer pack, as well as the SDK, we got a bunch of sample code. This one happens to feature not only using the one engine, but it also has a good CodeBench file so that you can load it up and kind of go through it on the native OS. So in-memory JPEG parsing, decompression using Tiny JPEG API. Not much for any UI in this example. We'll eventually get there too. We're going to allocate a buffer, decode a buffer, free a buffer, calls Tiny JPEG functions, init, parse, get, decode, free. It's got a CodeBench file, which will make going through all the code and kind of knowing whether or not you've typed something funny or making a build, etc., a little bit more controlled. In this case, we are not going to get away with Docker. I actually did test that right before this clip, and it turns out it's missing some libraries. Probably could fix that, but for now. So we're just going to skip straight to interacting with this over here. So, good old-fashioned stuff here. We got Pete's FTP, we got the aforementioned program running. It's got a nice spiffy picture of the ocean, beach, right? And let's go ahead and kill that. So, let's bring this guy to the forward. VA load JPEG CBP. This is the config file, if you will, for the project in CodeBench, right? And then here's the various sources, one of the binaries that were built. It's the one I was just running. When you run it, you kind of got to give it the path to this C file, sorry. Not to be confused with the actual C file. So let's see. New bypass. Don't know why that's not working. So here we have CodeBench loading up. We're native in the OS at this point. Coming in again over the Elgato, this guy loads up, takes a moment or so. Meanwhile, let me go ahead and kill some output over here. Let it retarget itself because it doesn't think it's in its natural directory. So we got some code tips, there's some help dialogues and whatnot in here. So inside a code bench, I mean, you could wire up macros, you have various build things, you have over here on the main project tree view, if you right click and go to project settings, you can kind of go through what the build arguments are for this, right? Build out the paths, any custom make arguments. Looks like this is pretty boilerplate, but still, it loads up. Native GCC compiler, target settings, right? And then, of course, in here, so you can get little pop-ups and hints about your progress, what references a thing, what a thing references, etc. As you kind of go through your code, it does the syntax highlighting, tab display of the various files, find and replace, and then of course, I find it's easier to launch some of these steps from here. So go over here, we can kind of do, I just want to run it, I want to make it, I want to force it, I want to clean it, etc. Right? So let's go ahead and do all forced. And then we got the build output down here. Right? And if we go back over to our target directory, we've got the built target. Now, like I was saying before, if you want to just do this via the CLI, this is a little bit of a handy trick. Right? So I just drag that image file into the launch arguments, and I'm just making sure there's a little bit of white space here and here, and then execute, and we're back to the ocean. Well, looks like we got a little artifact in here, but it's okay. So my point is, we've got multiple paths. You can go through and, like I was showing you earlier, use things like Visual Studio or other Windows or Linux, maybe even Macintosh development programs that know GCC, and you can tell them where the SDK paths are. You can use Docker containers to go ahead and get an SDK, like a bundled toolchain, so you don't have to set all that up, which can be a little bit interesting. But you can also come over into the native environment and work on programs in here, and sometimes it actually will matter because it'll be quite difficult to get the I guess you could say the libraries and the build environment stuff going under the Docker container. A lot of the times it's fine. Every now and again I've seen a few projects that just will not build, at least not in the one image, maybe with modifications. I'm also learning here, so let's all take this journey together and see what all we can do. I mean, there's some really fun examples in the SDK. There's 3D modeling stuff. Let me see if I can get over there real quick. Yeah. Sorry, 3D rendering stuff. There's lots of little reaction demos in here. Several Warp Nova, Warp 3D, right? Texture Cube, and look, that's got a code bench project. So that will just load right up into an editor view. Of course, you can also test some of these things out yourself before you go and run them, because a lot of them have pre-built binaries in there. And for example, on the GUI front, I've done some exploration here quite a bit. Trying to get my own head wrapped around, well, frankly, coding for any GUI, but coding for Amiga. So here's a nice little example. Now this one doesn't have a code bench file, but you could build one if you wanted to, and of course you could just load all the C code into code bench, create a project, etc. A lot of these will have kind of hidden kinda in the comments at the beginning of the file. Back over here real quick. So if I go to this,
It's to final voyage.
Here. And you were in click tab. Click tab example. Right. So up here in the beginning, we've got a little compile example. Those generally work almost any OS, right? So you can explore this example, for example, in Visual Studio Code or whatnot, or right here in one of the native editors. There's lots of little text editors for the operating system. Like, hey, I want to try something new, I want to get something new. Well, you know, we've got Odyssey, so you can pop into a web browser, go up on things like OS4 Depot or development website. Where are you? Man, I've clicked on a lot of stuff. Just there it is, coding.net. I don't know why I forgot that URL. Some really fine demos up in here, including some references to other editors and tools like the GUI builder. I have to try that stuff. Might make my life a lot easier. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause this one. Everybody needs to get busy. Oh, and one more note. Publish your source code. Things drift. People are going to have to recompile the stuff you've produced. So unless there's a commercial reason, let's all try to make sure we do a GitHub or something and publish what we're writing.
We're just curious if there is there any activity today out in the Groom Lake area?
Any activity where, sir?
Out in the Groom Lake area.
Lake Music, I don't have any of that information available.
It's the final voyage.
We're just curious if there is there any activity today out in the Groom Lake area.
Any activity where, sir?
Out in the Groom Lake area.